Good evening and welcome to our Sunday Fireside Chat. If this is your first Fireside Chat, it gives you a chance to engage with us on a slightly more informal setting. This is the sort of traditional South African way to spend an evening out in the African bush with a nice fire burning in front of us, and for once, no smoke flying directly towards us, making us sob our way through each and every Fireside Chat in the last few weeks. Now, as you see, I find myself somewhat bereft of company. James is on leave, Brent is rushing back, I can hear him even now. I can hear the accelerator of Rusty working nice and hard, and the odd elephant trumpeting in the distance. And just to let you know that Sam is also now on leave. He's been working incredibly hard for his first work cycle, and joining us for the first time, and such a wonderful and valued member of the team that he is. Unfortunately, like us all, he does need a break every now and again, so he's gone off on leave, and he bids you all a fond farewell, and he will be back in the not too distant future. What an extraordinary week it has been. Hard to believe. This time a week ago, I was sitting in the middle of the UK. I headed back there for my graduation ceremony, got to see people that I have not seen in quite a few years, and all of a sudden back on a plane, back here, celebrating Sam's birthday, and all of this happening in the space of just a couple of days. I've been feeling positively surreal. There's nothing quite like the grounding feeling of the African bush. Now, naturally, the first thing that I wanted to do was to head back across towards the hyena den and figure out exactly how things were going there and how the cubs have grown. You know that it's one of my happy places, and the smoke is coming. It's coming closer and closer. It's a toss-up now. It's whether or not it's going to blow towards Gendre or whether or not it's going to come towards myself. But yes, it's been an incredible week, and the silence of a winter's evening in the bush is truly spectacular. We've got the wide open skies, we've got the prospect of a full moon rise coming up in the next few minutes, and the glorious sunset happening behind me. The more astute or observant of you might have noticed that we shuffled a little bit so as to shift around to match the setting sun, and also to help us with our smoke inhalation problem that we've been enduring over the last few weeks. Now, Jane, before we get into the specifics of the Fireside Chat, you've actually got a general question for us. Now, Jane is watching in Tennessee and would like to know, why is it that lions and leopards, when they lie down, very often lie with their paws either upwards or kind of facing upwards with the pads exposed? And you wanted to know if there's a reason for that, because you've noticed it as a general pattern. And I think there's a couple of things to it. I think that it's just the way that their anatomy works. They find that it is more comfortable. But also bear in mind that the paws, without any fur covering them, can actually be quite a nice heat exchange surface. So when they're not necessarily feeling too hot, but they'd like the air to just blow across the pads of their feet, it is actually one of the main cooling mechanisms that they can employ. The most important one, of course, being that panting that they do. Dogs, cats, all do it, especially when we see them with very full bellies. But in particular, that's why they tend to do it. I think it's just a nice place for the wind to blow across them, and I think it also is quite nice when they've been walking on them. Hyenas do it as well, and I mentioned that I went across to the hyena den as soon as I got back to Djuma, just to see how the little ones were doing and to see if they were still around. Now, we have prepared a very short little clip for you, just to show you how much they have grown if you've missed out on those sightings, and to explain a little bit about the dynamics between the different members. Have a look at this clip. We are very much in luck, and the hyena have shown them once again, or shown themselves once again, at the Aubrey's Road Hyena Den. It's hard to believe that these are the same little monsters that we saw a couple of months ago, tiny, uncoordinated, without any spots, and dark brown in color and wrinkly, with skin that seemed much too large for their bodies, and those weak back limbs that sent them tumbling. Just a little brief overview of my surprise there at seeing just how much the cubs have grown, and Also, surprise, here is Brent. He has
Hi,
arrived.
everyone.
He's arrived very much on time. You weren't late at all.
I know, I was worried that big herd of elephants was possibly cause a bit of lateness. And then, of course, as I drove in, the lion starts roaring, and
What have you
but
there?
I'm back here, so I'm with you guys on Fireside Chat
Thank you
now.
for not leaving me all on my own.
I know, it
I
was
would
tempting.
have been quite distressed. We were just chatting a little bit about the hyenas at the hyena den at Aubrey's Road. Everybody told me they'd moved. I was quite
Do we get hyenas
disappointed.
here?
I'm not sure if you've ever met them. There's a whole
Okay,
clan,
okay.
and they have names.
Do they?
Yes, and on the subject of names, that's actually one of the questions that we have been asked about the hyena dynamics, just because we've got so much going on at the hyena den. We've started watching this particular set of cubs from basically from their first emergence from the den up until now, where they're between 5 and 7 months old and absolutely full of nonsense, very full of curiosity. And they've really given us a fantastic perspective into the dynamics of a hyena clan, because of course within a hyena clan they aren't necessarily, so it's not really like an elephant herd where everybody's related and the older females take the lead. They've actually got several what are known as matrilineal lines, in terms of you've got females and her offspring, maybe her sisters as well being part, and then a separate group of females, and they're all part of the same clan, but they have different hierarchies. And we had a question through from a Kathy in Tennessee about, is Madam still the matriarch of that clan, and how does she fit in with all of the dynamics and what's going on there? So just a quick explanation, just because I'm going to take this from here, if you
No, go for
don't
it.
mind. Just in terms of the current dynamics that we've witnessed, yes, she is still the matriarch. As far as we can tell, her reaction, every single hyena is submissive to her, and every single hyena is submissive to her cubs. Her current set of cubs, the January twins, are still there. Now, you wanted to know, Kathy, about her offspring, just because you've lost track. We don't know, we think Corky and Pretty are also related to her. They're certainly high-ranking individuals, and they demonstrate that in their reactions to other hyenas, but they are still submissive to her youngest set of cubs. How that means they're related to her, they could be sisters, they could be oldest daughters. I did notice that Corky's actually taller than Madam, but Madam is just probably one of the stockiest hyenas I've ever seen. She's built, she's huge. So that's a quick rundown. Madam's also got a cub known as Bella, who's now not actually a cub. She's a sub-adult of sorts. He is a sub-adult to Bella, Bella for short. And he, as a clan male, but as a male of the matriarch, has an interesting little slot that he fits into, and I think he might be
Lions are
sticking
calling
around.
again. There's lions calling there and there.
Oh, how wonderful. Anyway, that's the quickest rundown that I could possibly give you, Kathy, and we can talk in more detail when we do get to the hyena den. But you've had an extraordinary week, apart hyenas aside.
Yes, no, we have been quite lucky. The cats have been giving us quite the runaround this week. But
As we can hear.
Yes, they're there and nowhere near here. Well, I wouldn't mind them being behind us at the moment. But we went down to Cheetah Plains and we were searching for cheetahs. We do quite often there. But also the nice thing about Cheetah Plains is there are some other leopards we can possibly see there. And we got to see the incredible Inkanyin and her two cubs. So let's have a look at this little clip of them. Inkanyin, she's a beautiful female. Now, there come the cubs. Isn't this exciting? Look at that, isn't that wonderful? We're just going to keep still. She is moving towards us. And look at those little round rotund bellies. Obviously Nkanyin's been keeping them well fed. Oh, look at that shaft of light coming out from the clouds behind. Now, wouldn't it be incredible if that shaft of light was popping through right on them like a spotlight on a play? Look here. Look at that. Look at that shit right here. We've got a cub. It looks like the cubs are going to cross either side of us. That's in Canyon. Oh, you can hear that little contact call. Now we've got decisions. Here's the little boy, and behind Dave is the little girl, but we'll stick with the little boy. Absolutely magic. Wasn't that absolutely spectacular? So that was the first time those cubs have been seen on the live drives. I've been lucky enough when I had friends of mine on honeymoon. I saw them when I was driving out of Juma Vuyatela, but that was the first time to share it with all of you. And it was really spectacular. Unfortunately, not the longest sighting. She did eventually move back into Nkoro and then eventually into the Kruger National Park. But I know Jamie's a little bit jealous about that.
I'm sitting here trying to contain it, but I am exceptionally jealous because I have yet to see Nkanyeni on her own, and I certainly have yet to see her cubs. And I was jealous when you first saw them, and I'm still jealous now. But I shall contain it. There will be opportunities.
Diane was wondering about the correct pronunciation of Nkanyeni. And we unfortunately have Hubert in the darkness behind here, and I yelled across while we're watching the clip, Hubert, how do you say it properly? So it is with the I. I have been incorrect. I do apologize. It is Nkanyeni.
I made exactly the same mistake that Brent did, and James shouted at me.
Yes.
And he did give me quite a lesson in the fact that we have a tendency to, especially with Shangaan and local names, drop that final vowel at the end. We do the same with Shambambala na.
Yes,
Apparently.
in Zulu and Swahili and other languages, you would drop that. So James is our, as well, obviously not, but Hubert's our Shangaan local expert. But James,
Yes.
in terms of all of us, can speak the best Shangaan by far.
So, I mean, a really, truly extraordinary sighting from what I saw of it.
It's very pretty.
Yes, and it's so nice to see a male and a female cub and to actually already start to see the size difference between the two. And from what we can tell, we're getting the same indication from Karula. We never fully managed to figure out what the sex of the second cub is. We know one is a male, but we strongly suspect that the second is a female. So you immediately start to see the difference in their personalities. And we've been fortunate enough to spend a bit of time with Karula, but we have yet to actually spend any time with Shadow, her daughter,
Yes.
and her remaining cub.
Well, Dave and I had a tail.
A tail.
A tail,
You
a
saw a
tail,
tail.
a tail.
I thought you were going to say you have a story to tell.
Yes,
Okay.
a tail and a tail.
A
A tail within a tail.
Ah.
So we got the call that Shadow was moving towards our southern boundary, and we rushed there and was hoping she were going to proudly stroll straight into us, and she didn't. So she stopped about 50 meters away from us, and she went up a tree. And then while we were sitting there, I saw this movement at the base of the tree, and then the other guide who was inside the other property said, listen, the cubs just arrived and we left. So there's only one cub. No one is sure how it has died. There's been speculation whether it's hyena, whether it's lion, leopard. More than likely, just because of the area she's been hanging out in, I think there's a strong possibility it's another male leopard. And I don't want to say this too loud, but one we all love, Kunyuma was seen quite close to her den site a few times.
I didn't think about that.
So I think that's possibly the most likely scenario which has happened to the second cub. So she only has one cub at the moment.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting situation because, of course, as we know, most of the recorded, or at least the majority of recorded leopard cub deaths are through unknown male leopards or other male leopards. And sometimes the mistakes happen and it could possibly even be their father, but that's relatively unusual. As you know, we never know exactly what the paternity of a set of cubs is like. And James Richards, you were wondering, because a female leopard mates with as many different male leopards as she possibly can, you wanted to know whether or not that's actually one of the reasons why they have evolved the rather complex method that they have in order to induce conception, in order to induce fertilization. And I see exactly where you're going with that, because obviously it's with all of the cats, it's induced ovulation. They require repeated mating sessions in order to actually physically ovulate and for fertilization to occur. Interesting theory. I don't think it's that, though. I think it's the chance that has evolved in terms of being the best possible way to prolong that period of that moment up to fertilization to allow a bigger, better male with better genetics to come through.
And also, and you'll see that when in looking after cubs, the females spend a lot more effort and a lot more time with the male cubs. They leave the female cubs, they become independent at quite often a year and a half before the male cubs do. Now, the reason for this is that female's genetic line has more possibility to get into other genetic lines through a male because he is going to mate with multiple females. And then another interesting thing
That's
actually about...
such a good... I've never thought about that before.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting point.
So, yeah, and another reason we've been asked recently about why we're not seeing so much of Karula around her normal spot. Well, I have a theory, and I think it's to do with the hyena clan. So the hyenas is just up here, over my shoulder here, whereas before it was further down towards the southern boundary. The clan spent a lot more time. The clan has also grown incredibly since I've been here, and Karula's preferred den site for her most of her previous litters have been around the Gallagher drainage lines. Now, there are 3 different hyena dens that have all been active in the last 3 months in that exact area. So I think she's moved further south. There seems to be a lot less hyenas in the south and the east. So that's possibly why we're not seeing too much of Karula.
The one interesting thing about that, though, is that she's pushed south towards Little Gowrie and Hoffman's and those sorts of areas. And, of course, that's where the Styx cubs have been, or where the Styx females
I did tell everyone
denning.
today.
Oh, you told them the good news.
I told them the good news. Not
heard the
leopard
good
cubs,
news.
but lion cubs. So there are
so
8
exciting.
Styx lions cubs at the moment.
I'm sure you're all champing to see them.
Me
I know
too.
We are.
So, Dr. Debbie's wondering about the pregnant in Kahuma lioness. She would like an update. Jamie?
I don't have any updates for you except that she is missing. It did occur to me whilst following alarm calls in a very thick drainage line this afternoon that she might possibly be there waiting to alert me to her presence. I knew it was unlikely, but the thought did flit across my brain at one point, especially when a francolin shot up from the grass right beneath my feet. You know that moment?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Dr. Debbie, I know she spent quite a bit of time hanging on the drainage line out of Buffelshoek Dam. Although, since I've been back, I haven't seen all 5 Nkumas together, but they have been seen together to the west of us. So I'm not so sure. I would really like to see them, and I'm not going to try speculate till we can actually see them.
Do.
Yeah, so
Absolutely.
We'll let you know as soon as we do get that.
So many exciting prospects. And then, of course, we've got the fact that we're going into winter, honey badger sightings this week, and then, of course, the highlight of my week, which was a very special wildcat sighting from this morning, just to return the jealousy.
Very jealous.
What we found, I think we've either found a genet or an African wildcat. Look at that.
No, that doesn't look like a genet to me.
That is not a genet. That is an African wildcat. How absolutely incredible. That's a first for me out here.
Look at that perfect red tinge. Now you can really see what I was talking about behind the ears. That is one of the distinctive features of an African wildcat.
They're incredibly secretive, and of course, being so small, they aren't often seen, especially in summer. That's why we're so lucky to be going into winter now.
Hello, gorgeous. I'm actually going to take the spotlight right off it now so that you get the full effect of those eyes.
Hey, oh, stalk mode. Yeah, there's a huge breeding herd crossing to Sydney's. Oh, there he goes. I cannot stress enough for new viewers how rare this sighting is. Oh, look at that.
As we sit and listen to the lion's call, brings to the end a very exciting day for me. My first African wildcat since starting working on Djuma for WildEarth and doing these live safaris. And I think that the excitement may or may not have come through in my voice as I squeaked my way through it initially. It was very embarrassing. Definitely went up about 2 octaves. I'll try not to do that in future, but you could get the excitement coming through. And of course, I promised you a surprise in that clip, and that is the fact that the final control ladies managed to slow down that final moment. Because, of course, the story behind that is we sat with that cat for 2.5 hours. And it hadn't moved in the last 45 minutes. And by it hadn't moved, I really mean it hadn't moved. And it just chose that moment as I turned around to untie my hair and retie it because it was blowing in my face, and Viam, I think, was distracted by something else, went forward. And Safari Dean had asked me earlier whether or not a wildcat would go for something like a scrub hare. There you go. It caught a scrub hare. I thought it had caught a drongo just because the drongos were all flying around and it was chaos and my hair was flying around and I was trying to grab the wrong radio mic to call for a crash cut. It was highly entertaining. I wish you could have seen our expressions when that happened. You can just imagine it though. Absolutely, it was incredible. So the answer to that question about whether or not the wildcat caught anything, yes, it did. It caught a scrub hare. You also wanted to know, Debbie, I think it was, how big the African wildcat is. It's roughly the size of a domestic cat. It's a little bit taller than your average domestic breed. Of course, we've got so many domestic cats out here. It's slightly longer limbed. I mean, I'm sure you've seen loads of wildcats in your life.
I've been
but
very
it's
lucky.
Absolutely incredible.
Well, Don has actually pointed a very important thing that I'm quite a big soldier on. And Don is asking whether any of our staff have cats. No, it would be highly irresponsible to have a domestic cat in this environment. Firstly, they taint the genetics of the wildcats, so they can hybridize with them. And it is one of the biggest problems facing African wildcats throughout Africa is hybridization with domestic cats. Also, they bring in disease, and disease an African wildcat might not have immunity to. And those feline diseases can easily jump through to other cats, other smaller cats. So Debbie, no. But with the African wildcat, you get domestic cats. I think it's a tabby or whatnot, that
Yeah.
looks semi-similar.
Very similar.
It's just the coloration for me is different. It's slightly more tan, and the ears.
Yeah.
The pink ears.
Well, I know a lot of
stand
viewers
out.
were saying, how do we know we're not just looking at somebody's pet cat? I had to say, I promise you, this is the most African wildcat-looking African wildcat I have seen in the wild in a long time.
Yes, no, it was definitely an African wildcat, and you can just see their movements with those slightly longer limbs. When you watched it stalking, you saw those shoulders. They got longer shoulders. With those longer limbs. So if you watch your domestic house cat stalk, those shoulders don't come nearly as high as that wildcat, and you see how flat he got to the ground, and you could definitely see those longer limbs and the shoulders as he was stalking forward.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's also the fact that we're very fond of the birds that visit our gardens.
Yes.
And I don't think we'd appreciate a cat coming in and removing any of the birds from the trees.
Not only the birds, domestic house cats are responsible for 80% of the avian extinctions in the last 100 years. So if you do choose to keep a domestic house cat, please put a bell on it. And every cat owner in the world says, but my cat doesn't. I promise it does. They are incredibly efficient little predators. And it's not only birds, it's geckos, snakes, insects, moths, butterflies. They are so perfectly designed for hunting and killing things.
Yeah. But, that aside, we had a long chat about that. We had a long chat this morning about the ethics of domesticating animals as well. And we were talking about wild animals versus domestic animals and where it's appropriate to draw the line. Because, of course, what the sighting did for us was it just reminded us of all the amazing little cats that are out there. And I know that you were discussing
We had a long chat about
that on the
yes.
drive this afternoon, because there's just so many of them out there. And so far, we've ticked off serval and African wildcat.
Caracal missing.
Caracal missing.
But if any of you ever get a chance to get to South America has got the most amazing array of little predators, cats and dogs, that occur. So it is definitely high on my sort of bucket list to get to go look at those incredible little predators.
Now, the first thing I did when I got home from that sighting was actually rush back to read my copy of the Stevenson Hamilton book, The Wildlife in South Africa. So, yes, absolutely, I am still reading that.
It was from Hannah, I think.
Yes,
it was.
Hannah, thank you very much. You were saying, I think you've got the same book, and you were saying there's a section in there about the African wildcat. And it was was once upon a time described in a word that I'm not going to say, Brent's not going to say it, is a word that has very strong South African connotations, a very negative word. Obviously this book comes from a time around the early sort of 1940s, when such terms were not taboo, but it was a word that jumped out of the page and actually gave me quite a fright, because in his time they'd realized that this was a separate wild species, but it was still kind of seen as not as important as some of the other little cats, as kind of just a cat.
Yes, and quite often, I mean, if we look at the history of Kruger, and Stevenson Hamilton was the first warden of Kruger, all predators were shot on sight. Wild dog, cheetah, lion, leopard, hyena, both brown and spotted, to conserve the zebras and the impala. So,
Such was their understanding at the time.
and that's an amazing thing if you look how far Kruger has come since then. And now we're sitting part of the greater Kruger. I mean, most governments in that era open a national park to private sector. You must be joking. But it is amazing how the conservation ethos in South Africa has developed over these years.
And our understanding has developed as well. It was the amazing thing about that Stevenson Hamilton book is he wrote it right at the end of his career, and actually quite close to the end of his life. And it was like he'd come to this realization that the more interference, the worse things got, the more worse things became. And he actually says it specifically in his introduction, saying that nature actually has a way of handling her own problems, and that we actually don't really know all that goes on. And now 50 years later we're still discovering. 60 years later,
we are gardeners in Eden. We go take an absolutely perfect, wonderful, completely entire system, and we start, I want to put a tree there, dig a hole. We're real gardeners, and if you look at the great sort of really incredible wild places left in Africa, they've been left alone to the most degree. So it's very, very interesting how perceptions have changed. Even with management, management now is far more hands-off than it was in the past. We don't get involved if an animal's injured. There are certain circumstances.
And of course we just spoke about that today, this afternoon, about moving the hippos from this area, because they've been brought here by man's actions.
Yeah, so the development of the man-made dams caused hippos to migrate from the Sand River, and now we're coming into a drought. There's no grass. There's no grass for them. So it's one of those things. It's a very interesting thing, and I don't think anything's right or wrong just yet.
And Tammy Peterson, I cannot think of a more appropriate time, just to sort of broaden up the subject slightly, I cannot think of a more appropriate time for us to have fireside chats, but during winter.
Yes,
when in fact we truly appreciate the large, very warm thing in front of us. I have to tell you something that
Dave, next time make it bigger.
Bigger fire.
We're quite far from it. It's a bit chilly.
In summer, when it's sort of 35 degrees or close to 100 degrees Fahrenheit still after dark, and you're sitting there thinking, I don't quite like to get as far back from this burning thing as possible. Yes, we will be having fireside chats. We're not guaranteeing them every single week.
But when we've got something interesting like the wildcat in Canyon to chat about.
A little bit of a surprise every now and again. And the same goes for our Facebook Live appearances after Drive. Those will be roughly every 2 or 3 times a week.
Just depending.
Yeah.
So guys, in case you joined a little bit late and wondering where Sam is, he is off on leave. So don't worry, he'll be back in a few weeks.
Yes.
And of course, James will be coming back at the end of the week.
James Richards has raised a very valid point. I'm sorry, I can't play the guitar and I can't sing at all. In
you
fact,
don't want me to sing.
You really don't want either of us to sing. And James Richards, you were wondering, could I not have played the flute? I somehow felt that a little bit of subtle Vivaldi, whilst around the campfire, didn't have the true South African theme. But I'm working on it, James. I'm working on it. I promise. At some point, I will have my arm twisted into it. Thank you to all of the cameramen, not just from us, but also from all of the viewers, who I think really appreciate the hard work that our fantastic, and the talent that our fantastic cameramen do have.
That is very, very true.
And most especially, thank you to you all.
Yeah, thanks for watching. And since you don't have a song, I'm going to have to leap across the fire.
Oh my word, I was terrified there for a second.
Okay, here we go. Bye!
Bye-bye. Have a wonderful day.